Hey guys, I want to apologize for my camera I had originally. Started filming with this one because I'd loaned my good camera, which I have in my hand, to my son for a school project. So I broke out this camera here, this Kodak ZX1, to videotape the repair on this tractor, and the battery died on me within just a few minutes. I thought they were charged, but I guess they weren't. So I'm at my buddy's shop, so it wasn't just a quick go home and try to find another camera. And by the time I was able to charge these batteries up, I could have the tractor pulled apart. So that's what I did. So I want to fill you guys in on what I found. The hydraulic pump sits right here, and I pulled it off, and you can see that this gear the teeth are off of it, and it sits right in here on the end of the camshaft. And when I pulled the pump off, I could obviously see that I had issues, and this gear spun. So I knew that something had broke, and what had broke was all these bolts must have came loose, and then the gear sheared them off. And so what I was up against was these little nubs sticking in the end of the camshaft, and I had to take with a small little chisel I sharpened and back them out of there. And this one here I had to actually put an easy out in, but I got all four of the bolts out. They look like they were a little short from a previous repair, and so we've got, and plus they're non-hardened, they're just standard bolts. So we bought some 5/16 grade 5 bolts to go back in. While we had it split apart, I'll show you, when you split these apart, if you get some threaded rod, this is 5/8 threaded rod, and once you get all the bell housing bolts off and you're getting ready to split it, you need to capture and align the engine with the transmission with some kind of alignment system. And I normally use a long threaded rod. So this is a 5/8 3-foot threaded rod that I cut in half, and then you want to capture it. You throw a nut on here, and you throw a nut on here, and you do the same over here. That way, when you pull it apart, if it gets away from you, it's not going to go past the nut. And so then the way you split it is of course you take all the bolts out, and I only took out just what I needed. I know a lot of people would take all this stuff off, but just take off what you need to split it. And then you set a jack under the back and take just enough pressure off to equalize the pressure, and then you chalk a tire, rear tire, and then you put another jack under the front, and you put a little pressure on that jack, and then you start wiggling these tires, and eventually this will start splitting, and it'll just come straight out. And also these bolts are going to help us when we go back together. What we'll do is we'll jack up the transmission and the engine and measure across from top to bottom and make sure that's the same. And then when we go together, these alignment bolts will keep everything lined up as we go together. And also, if a jack slips or something like that, it won't get away from us. So it's a safety feature also. So again, I want to apologize. I did a lot of work. This is about 2 hours worth of work that I didn't get filmed, but I'll just tell you that these struts here, I just took them loose And also the steering arms here, I just took them loose and then brought them back to the back to get them out of the way. Oh, what else did we do here? Well, that's really about it. The only other exciting thing that happened was the flywheel is so heavy that that I used a engine hoist to get the flywheel off. I don't know what that weighs, but it was more than I wanted to handle. Just trying to grab it right here, and I didn't want it to hit the floor. I guess I could have put a tire or some wood down there and let it drop, but my buddy had an engine hoist here, so we just used that. Also, inside here is a pilot bearing, and that was just, it was really bad. The face of the flywheel looks really good. We'll just clean that up and rough it up with a little bit of sandpaper. And of course, while you have any tractor split apart, you always want to change out the clutch, throwout bearing, and the pilot bearing. The pilot bearing fits on the end of the input shaft of the transmission, and you always want to check that, see if that's wore, and that is not. It's in good shape. Also, when I split it apart, I noticed there was a lot of antifreeze that ran out of here, and I wonder where it came from. And this was all full of dirt and grease and stuff, almost flush, and I could see that this plug was leaking, and when I cleaned it, it just started squirting out of there. And so we're going to change out this plug and this plug, and a lot of people call them freeze plugs, but they're really not put in there for freeze protection, although you might get one to pop out if it froze. But these are actually from when they made this castings out of sand, and so they'll be all around your block to get the sand out for when they put them on a vibratory machine and the sand comes out of there. And so you put new plugs in. I think these are, I can't remember, 2 1/16 or 2 1/8. And I've got this one partially knocked out. I'm going to show you how to get easy way of getting these out, and then I'm going to show you how to get this one out from beginning to end. That'll be in a bit. So that's about it. The other thing was, we found out that these come with either a 9-inch or a 10-inch clutch. So you want to measure your clutch disc, because I thought they all came with 9-inchers, but as we found out, they come in 10-inch also. And the new pressure plate, the old pressure plate, one of the fingers was way down, and so I knew that was junk. And the new pressure plate, its fingers are adjustable, and there should be in the manual measurement to put these fingers for this tractor. So we'll want to check that out. We've got the new drive gear, hydraulic drive gear that goes on the back of the camshaft, and we got a throwout bearing to press on the throwout carrier. Throwout carrier was just fine, so we'll take that bearing off, put the new one on. Here's the new pilot bearing. The old pilot bearing actually had one shield on it, and the other side had no shield on it, and all that's going to do is let rust and the disc plate material, dust get in there, and this thing was bad. So you want to put in a double shielded bearing, and I believe this is this is a 203 bearing, which would be a common alternator bearing. And you can get these with no shields, with one shield, with metal shields. It just depends on how you order it. The outside and inside diameter is the same. But so that's that. Everything's cleaned up and ready to go back together. So hopefully I'll have enough battery to, show you how it goes back together. And that's about it. I'll get back with you. Okay guys, we're going to take the throwout bearing off the throwout bearing carrier. Of course, that's the carrier, that's the bearing. So this is just a light press fit. It should be anyway. It's not a heavy press fit or a slip fit, but a vise or whatever, 2 blocks of wood, if you could set the bearing on and support it while you drive. We're going to drive the carrier out of the bearing. So right here I'm going to set that on the bench vise, and I found a socket that's the same size as the carrier. Now you can also use, if you're careful, a drift punch. Make sure you've ground it flat and taken any burrs off the side, and we can try this first. And it's just a matter, some people may not have a socket that big, so if you have a punch or you make a punch out of a bolt, whatever, you can, if you work slow at this, you should be able to get it. There we go. So you can see that falls right out. I could have used a socket and drove it right out too, but that's just how easy it is to change a throwout bearing. Now I'm going to clean up this carrier before I put the new bearing on, and I'll get back with you. Okay, I got the carrier cleaned up, and I about froze my fingers off. It's about 30 degrees out in the shop, and so is the cleaning tank solvent, and then sprayed it with brake clean afterwards, which even made it colder. But you can see where the throwout forks fit on here, like so, and they slide and they push. That they wore a couple of different grooves in there. So since there's 2 different grooves, and that it looks like at one time when one groove was wore in it, and then when they put it back together, they turned it over, and either by design or accident, and so it started wearing the groove in another place. But what I did was, that's okay, but what I did was I took some sandpaper and I just kind of softened those edges. And to be honest with you, I don't know which way I took it off, and I'm just going to throw it back on there, but I'm going to soften that edge. And then on the throwout forks themselves, I looked, and they're in really good shape, and I'm just going to take any burrs off of the throwout forks with just some 150 grit emery cloth, and then we'll be good to go. So you just do this a little while, and get the sharp edges. It doesn't have to be perfect, and so I'm going to call that good. So we've got the carrier all cleaned up, ready to go back. So I'm going to just put the throwout bearing on, and then I'll just give it a, well, normally it would take a little tap, but I snap that on. So you can see what you want is make sure it's tight enough that it's not going to spin on the carrier, that any spinning is done on the bearing. And that only spins when you engage the clutch and it pushes on the clutch fingers like this. That's the only time that bearing will spin. So when you release it, there'll be some free play there and it won't touch. So this bearing actually doesn't spin that often, only when you depress the clutch. All right, that's good to go. Okay guys, right here is your throwout fork, and when you push the clutch pedal down, it throws the throwout bearing forward. And I was just talking earlier about, I thought the right here where it pushes against the throwout bearing, where we sanded on it, that it was a little rough, but actually it's really nice. I'm not going to do anything to those, except we'll put a little grease on it. This is where the throwout bearing slides on. We want to make sure that's nice and clean. We're going to grease it. And right here is where your clutch plate slides on. All these splines of the input shaft of the transmission, that should have grease on it, because you do not want your clutch disc to lock up on here. You want it to be able to slide around and find its own center. If your clutch plate splines rust to this, you'll have clutch issues. So you want to make sure these are all good and clean, and then you'll put grease on that. And then this goes into the pilot bearing, which this keeps this input shaft of the transmission in center with the transmission. You want to keep it all in line, and if you didn't have a bearing here, this would just flop around. So that's why just about every manual transmission, you'll have a pilot bearing that's in your crankshaft, and it can be a pilot bushing or a bearing, but on, like I said, a manual transmission, there'll be something to center the input shaft on, whether it be a car, truck, or tractor. So right here, I can tell the bearings never spun on that shaft. That's good to go into the new pilot bearing. Really don't have to be any grease on that. But grease the splines, and you'll see inside the throwout bearing carrier, there's a grease reservoir. It's just a place where they've machined out to hold grease, and so we're going to load that up too, because once we put it in there, we can't grease it. So I'll get back with you. Okay, what we have here on the throwout bearing carrier, you can see there's a machined out groove inside there. I can't get the light quite right. You can see it right there. See, there's a void in there. You want to fill that with a lot of grease. And then we're going to grease up everything that it slides on, and grease up these splines, and put it all together. The carrier bearing, the carrier of the throwout bearing has 2 holes in the side of it, and that's for return springs. And that's what this pair of lock and pliers is. We're going to pull the springs back up, so this bearing will pull back in the neutral position all the time. So we'll put some grease on there and assemble it. At first, we're going to put a lot of grease here where the throwout bearing carrier slides around. Then we're going to put some grease on the throwout forks themselves. Like so. Then we're going to put a lot of grease in the throwout bearing carrier. Make sure that void's filled up. There we go. Throw a little grease here where the forks ride. Right there. And like I said, this can go in either way. And so we are going to slide that on. Like so. Now this grease here, we'll just use it, put on the splines. Excess grease. Now a lot of you guys are going to say, oh, that grease is going to get all over the clutch plate. It really won't. You don't have any issues with that. If it does, it'll be a little bit, and it'll be gone in no time. So as you can see, it moves really good. I'm going to pull this return spring up, connect it, and then grab this other one. Well, it fell off, but I'm going to put this other one on. I have to get on the camera side. So I'll get back with you when that's done. Alright guys, I got the other spring put in. You can see that. I'm going to show you here, when you push down on the clutch, it throws the forks forward and brings that bearing forward, and then the springs return it. So everything feels nice and glassy and smooth. So we're good to go. The easiest way to take these plugs out, I started this one and I thought it'd be a good tip for everybody to see. But basically, you take a chisel, and not a sharp chisel, and you drive straight in, and then you get a pair of pliers and you grab here and pull it out. As you can see, that one was completely rusted through. That was going to be an issue. That happened when I was just cleaning the grease out of it, that hole. So change that one out. Then also here, you can see you drive in one side, and a lot of times it just pivots in the hole. This one actually came loose, so you can move it around where you want it, like so. And then you get you a good set of pliers, grab it, and you pull it out this way. So that's how you get those out. Now we'll clean these the casting up here on the bore with some 150 grit sandpaper. And if you just use some emery cloth, whatever sandpaper you have laying around, I mean, you probably want to use at least 150 grit, 80 grit's fine, don't matter. What you want to do is get this all nice and clean, and don't worry, you're not going to remove so much material that it's going to change the size of it. You're just looking for a nice clean surface, free of rust and anything loose. So the new plug will go in just fine, and every one of these holes will have a chamfer on it. So you want to make sure that's nice and smooth and burr free, because that can hang you up. A lot of people, they just throw another one in on it, and if you're putting a new plug in on some loose material there or some rust, you'll have a place where it's going to leak. You may not see it right now, but believe me, it'll leak. So get her nice and clean. Get that chamfer good. Wipe it out. Make sure you feel it. That feels good. That one feels good. So we'll be ready to throw a new plugs in there. So I'll get back with you. Okay guys, what you want to do is get your new plug and make sure it's the right size, and I believe these are the right size. They're 2 1/16. And so find you a socket or a driver or something that fits inside of it pretty tight. This might be just a little bit too tight, because once you drive it in, these sides are going to come in because it's going to compress, and it might be too tight. So I'll just make sure I can keep rotating this as I drive it in. Also, you want to put a sealer on here, and the cleanest way of doing that, and I found the best stuff, is just copper coat. I've been using this stuff for 35 years or so, and I never worry about shaking it up, getting the copper mixed up. Just whatever comes out of it's fine. There we go. I'm going to have to get a smaller socket now. We got it started with the larger socket, but you can see it crimped down on it. I could barely get it out. So what we'll do is we'll take the smaller socket, which is pretty small, and we'll work it around and around as we tap it. Well, that's not working. I'm not getting a good hit on my hammer here. Good fall through. There we go. Now, as I'm tapping, move the socket all around so you're not hitting actually in the center. You're hitting right on the rim around here. Not outside the rim, but inside. Now, can you tap that in too far? You sure can. What you want to do is make sure that this edge of the plug is just past the chamfer. So you want to keep looking. Make sure you just pass the chamfer. Do any adjustments you need. And that has got about a 1/16 of an inch margin all the way around it. So that's good. Okay, same procedure for this one as the top one. As you can see, almost see here, I'm just past the chamfer, and I've got about a 3/32 margin on this one. I got the top one in about a 1/16 of an inch margin right there. You want the outside part of the cup to be just on the inside of the chamfer. Don't put it flush to the block. You won't be deep enough. It won't hold in. So you want to get past the chamfer and have the margin around here on the flat part of the bore the same. So if you're a 1/16 of an inch margin here, keep tapping it till you get a 1/16 of an inch margin here. You want that margin even, whatever the margin is. If it's 3/32, a 1/16, or just a hair below flush, that's the way you want the whole plug. You don't want this plug tilted in there in any way. It'll probably hold, but it's just a better job if you get it even. So if you drive it just a little bit deep, like this one here is just a hair deeper than what I was normally trying for, but I got one side a little deep, so I made it all even. We're still good though. It's not going to come out of there, it won't leak, and it'll be good for years. The thing about this one is, on this tractor, is when it's all together and there's plates up here, you've covered this plug up. So if that ever leaks, you've got to split the tractor apart to get to it. So what I suggest is, if you guys out there are putting a clutch in your tractor and you look over here and both these plugs look good, I would change them both out. Each plug was probably $3 or $4 and probably 15 minutes of time, and so that's going to take care of a lot of headaches in the future. So make sure you at least change these plugs out if you split your tractor. Okay, I'm going to put the new hydraulic pump drive gear on the back of the camshaft, and I've taken the cover and cleaned it up, and I'm going to just kind of prepare it for, here's the cover. I've got it cleaned up. I want to put a little copper coat around there and let it get tacky, and then glue my gasket on there, so I'll be ready to go. Just a little tip, so your gasket don't move around. You don't have to fiddle with it later. Alright, I put copper coat on the gear cover and I let it get tacky. Then I set the gasket in there and it just kind of stuck it down. So now I'm going to take just a little bit of copper coat and just lightly go over the gasket. And then I'm just going to let that set there. I probably won't be ready for it for another 5-10 minutes, but at least I have that prepped, so I don't have to jack around with it. So anyway, again, this copper coat is some good stuff. Okay guys, on our going back together, I'm going to put these bolts back with Loctite, so you want to make sure that the holes are nice, clean, and dry. So I'm squirting some electric motor cleaner in there to get all the grease out of the holes. Because if you put Loctite in there and it's all greasy, it's not going to work. And since there was an issue with that, I'm not going to take the chance of that coming loose again. So I'll get back with you. It's a good idea to spray down any of your new bolts or old bolts if you're going to put Loctite on them to get any manufacturing oil off of it. Then blow them off good. Okay, I'm using red Loctite, and it's a good idea to knead the bottle and shake it. Just something I always do. I think the directions say to do that. And then we've got new bolts and lock washers. I'm running out of battery here, and my secondary battery, which is supposed to be charged up, is not. I'm just having nothing but trouble here, so I'm going to try to rush through this. So you want to start all your bolts first before you start clenching any of them down. And you got about 15 or 20 minutes before the Loctite gets halfway solid, starts to cure, and then full cure in 24 hours. So just go around and tighten them up evenly, and then I could not find any torque specs on these, so I'm going to use just my experience here, and I'm going to have to put a bar in the gear here to lock it while I tighten this up. After a while, when you're a mechanic for a while, you get a feel for when the bolt starts to stretch and when to stop. So, and that's exactly what a bolt does. The way it holds, it stretches like a rubber band. And so, if you overstretch a rubber band, it's going to break. But if you don't stretch a rubber band, it's not going to hold as good. So that's all I'm doing, is just getting a feel for just a little stretch. And sometimes, I mean, it's easy to go overboard. And that's when you run into trouble. You want it tight enough where your bolt's stretched a certain percentage, and then that's how it holds. If it didn't stretch at all, there would be no tension and it would just back out. So I'm just getting them all even. I felt them all get to the point where they were wanting to stretch, and I just went probably a quarter turn more, and that's good. I'll put the screws in that and get back with you if my battery holds out. Okay, there's really nothing to see here. I just put the cleaned up the bolt or the screws and tighten those up. and you'll notice on the crankshaft there's a cutout so you can get this screw in and tighten it. So there you go. Now we're ready to throw the backing plate toward the front here, like so, and then put the pilot bearing in our flywheel and mount the flywheel. Okay guys, while I was getting ready to clean the flywheel up and show how to install the pilot bearing, I looked at the flywheel and look at this, the starter ring gear. There's no teeth on it right there. This tractor didn't have any known issues like that, but evidently it had been stopping in the right place. Man, it's just ate up. Those teeth are gone right there. So we're dead in the water right now. Okay guys, we're going to take this ring gear off. There's a couple of different ways to doing it. One is to take a big chisel, turn the flywheel over, and just work your way around till it comes off. If it appears to be too tight, then sometimes I take a cutting torch and cut it off. So we're going to find out. You can get a feel for it if it's coming off or not, and this one's coming off. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with this. Sometimes you can do that and it feels like it's just a solid piece of material, and so you know you have to take a cutting torch to it. So there it is. And you can see those teeth are gone. There's some others that's ready to go. But this is the best time to do this kind of work. You do not want to put something together like this that you're going to have to go to that much work later on to replace it. Even if you don't have the money, just set it to the side until you make enough money to get your parts, because to split a tractor in two just to put this gear on, it's just not worth it. So there you go. I'll wait for the new one. The new one we might have to might be able to drive on just like we drove that one off, or we heat it cherry red all the way around and expand it, and then it just drops off on by itself, and then it contracts as it gets cold and locks to the flywheel. But I don't know. I've never changed one of these on these 600 series, so I don't know if I can just drive the new ones on or heat them up and expand them. So anyway, that'll be part 2, I guess. Thanks for watching.